So it is April.
at least as of this recording.
So what did you check out this month?
Last month, I think it was last month, I talked about one of the Santo movies, the Mexican wrestler guy that fights monsters and stuff. So I watched another one of those, which was Santo y Blue Demon en el Mundo de los Muertos from 1970, which is Santo and Blue Demon in the World of the Dead. So Blue Demon was another Mexican wrestler that got his own movie series and sometimes crossed over with the Santo movies. That previous one was in black and white. That was 1963, I think. Going into 1970, everything's in color. Everything is way more violent. The previous movie felt like it was trying to be kind of like a Universal Monsters kind of tone. This one feels more like an Italian horror movie in some ways, but not nearly as gory as a lot of those get. The blood in here wasn't very convincing most of the time, but you've got people getting whipped, you got people getting stabbed, you have people getting burned at the stake, which was actually pretty cool because you see their skin burning off and stuff. It's back in the Middle Ages or something. There's this satanic cult that's sacrificing people to Satan and whatever, and Santo is trying to stop them. So Blue Demon, for some reason, is helping the cult, which they don't really explain. He's basically the same as Santo in most of the other movies. He's another good guy, but he's helping the cult, and a third of the way into the movie, suddenly you're in the present with no explanation and no setup for it or anything. It's just, oh, you're in the present now. And it turns out that the modern Santo is like a descendant of the old one, and the old one, his wife or girlfriend or somebody got murdered by a witch that was working with the cult or whatever. And in the present, Santo is going to marry this woman that's played by the same actress as the one that died in the past. And it's really funny because she talks about how much she loves him and whatever, and they're walking around taking like museum tours or something, and he walks around with his mask on everywhere, so you never see his face. So I wonder if she even knows what he looks like, but she's going to marry him. So the witch, I can't remember if she was still alive or if it was one of her descendants or something, but she starts possessing people in the present to, do their bidding or whatever. And a lot of the time she possesses his fiance. And I wondered why, if they're trying to stop him because he's their only real threat, why don't they just possess him and have him walk out into traffic or something? But instead, she summons up, I guess you'd call them zombies. They're dead people that fight on their behalf against Santo. And it's pretty funny because they just kind of have like gray paint on them a little bit. I will say the action was way better in this movie than the previous one. I like this one a lot more in general. The action was pretty good. And just like the previous one, they came up with an excuse to have some wrestling ring scenes. Santo's fighting this guy in the ring, and they possess the guy that he's fighting. So he starts attacking the ref, and he starts attacking everybody, and it was pretty funny. And then at the end of the movie, I don't remember why, but I think he has to rescue his girlfriend's soul or something after she got possessed. So he gets like hypnotized and goes into the underworld or whatever. And it wasn't as cool as I was hoping it was going to be. They mostly just put a red filter over everything and have him walking around in the woods with like fog and stuff. But it was still cool. And it was pretty funny because they reused footage from some other movies at times. And when they have the zombies waking up, for example, they have footage from what looked like a cool horror movie with like zombies coming out of crypts and stuff. But then when it cuts to footage from this movie, the video quality is completely different, but everything looks different. It just looks like people standing there and not like cool zombies that are crawling out of their crypts and stuff. And at the end, when he's in the world of the dead or whatever, he encounters these, I don't even know exactly what they were supposed to be, but these demonic creatures that have like tattered clothes over their heads and stuff. And then when it cuts from that footage from some other movie to the footage from this movie, it's just these guys standing there with literally just like a towel over their head. And then they start fighting, and that's the big end battle. So that was unintentionally funny. And there was footage. There's a part where he gets stabbed, and they have to do an operation on him. And they used real footage of some kind of heart operation where they cut open somebody's chest and you can see their heart beating and stuff. So that was cool.
Oh, that's
interesting.
Yeah,
I was not expecting that. So I enjoyed this movie. There's nothing to it other than seeing a weird Mexican wrestler guy fighting monsters and stuff. And I will say, for anybody that wants to watch these movies, unfortunately, from what I read, only 4 of them were dubbed into English. And the DVDs that I found, even though the listings were in English, they were entirely in Spanish with no subtitles or anything. There are a couple of releases that I found that were English language releases in terms of subtitles and background contents and stuff, but they're pretty expensive, and I don't think these movies are good enough to warrant something like that. I am going to try to find them for cheap, But yeah, I guess you're kind of out of luck if you're looking for these movies unless you want to watch them in Spanish, unfortunately. And that's actually all I had time to watch this month, other than some TV shows that I won't talk about until I finish them. I read a book called Field Guide to Monsters by Dave Elliot.
Okay, this could go either way, knowing how much you know about monsters.
Yeah, when I picked this up, I was really excited. It was basically a bunch of listings of movie monsters, although they also threw in questionable things like RoboCop. I don't know why RoboCop would be in a monster book, but I was excited. This is the kind of thing where as a kid I would have been like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to, try to watch all these movies and stuff. Oh man, I was so excited to get into this book, but as soon as I started reading it, typos and just grammar issues everywhere. I mean, there are just errors in the way the book is put together, but also errors in the writing where things just don't make sense. And there's a sense of humor throughout the entire thing that is so insipidly stupid. It's the kind of thing where you'll be reading something about giant ants or whatever, and they'll throw in some kind of jab at like Republicans or something or Democrats, or it doesn't matter. It's just it doesn't fit, and it's so dumb and juvenile and not funny. And that's what the entire book was like.
How much does this book cost?
The regular price for the one that I got, it was a bargain-priced book at $10, but it was on sale even below that for $5, so that's why I picked it up. But it was not worth 50 cents. It was so stupid. I would not recommend this book to anybody. It was insulting as a monster fan because there were so many inaccuracies in regards to each of these monsters where you could tell the guy that put it together said, nobody cares about this, whatever. Let's just say Godzilla's 600 feet tall and he's green and whatever, and just throw these dumb factoids in there that aren't even true.
What was the most non-monster in the book?
Probably RoboCop. I honestly didn't read the whole thing. I gave up pretty quickly because it was so dumb. I just kind of flipped through it, and I don't think I saw any monsters that I didn't recognize. But like I said, I didn't look through the entire thing. It was so stupid. I mean, some of the entries, I think the one for the creature from the Black Lagoon doesn't even have a picture from one of the movies. It's a picture of a toy. So I don't know what the deal is with that. It was just really crappily put together all around. And the intro presents the book as if it's an updated version of a book originally put together by Abraham Van Helsing. But the Van Helsing stuff in it directly contradicts Dracula, the book. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not surprised based on how the rest of the book is that it doesn't even get the facts right in regards to the specific movies it's talking about, even on the basic level. Probably, when it comes to books, probably the biggest disappointment I've ever experienced. So I would definitely not recommend checking that one out. I read Ringworld by Larry Niven from 1970. This won the Hugo and the Nebula for 1970. I didn't know going in that this book actually was part of a universe that had already been established in a bunch of short stories and other novels that he had written, but it didn't feel like it was missing anything. And it was really weird, so it's going to be kind of hard to describe. But basically, you have 4 characters that are traveling to this mysterious ring world. The idea is that it's like a Dyson sphere, but instead of entirely encapsulating a star, it's just a ring around the star, like the halos in Halo. But it's really big, to the point that it is literally incomprehensible how huge it is. The land area on it is like thousands of times of Earth's land area. And these characters are going there because one of them is an alien from a race called the Puppeteers, which have 3 legs and 2 necks with one-eyed faces on the ends of them with flabby lips that they use to pick things up. So yeah, it's really weird. This race they want to explore it for their own reasons, but they have the fastest form of space travel that anybody knows of. And the other races that they bring with them need this space travel because in 20,000 years, radiation from a bunch of explosions at the center of the galaxy, there's like a chain reaction of star explosions going on. In 20,000 years, that radiation is going to hit Earth, basically, and wipe everything out. So they need this fast travel to eventually be able to get away from it. Partially because they know that humans are too lazy to get going on that now, because they're like, well, that's in, however many generations, who cares? I don't think it was trying to do like a climate change thing, but that's kind of what it felt like, people putting it off till later. So the other people there, they're not all people, the other characters, you have a human who's over 200 years old. He's the main character. You have a Kazin, I guess they're called, which are giant humanoid cats that are extremely violent and aggressive. And you have a human female named Tila Brown who has been bred for luck. So she's very lucky.
Oh, okay.
Yes, which is every bit as weird as it sounds like. So they need this technology. And the humans and the Kazin have had wars in the past where they've almost wiped each other out. So the ring world, Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody knows who built it. But it's pretty clear that the people who built it were way advanced compared to everybody else. It's made out of a material that is practically indestructible, and just the ability to build something that big is just crazy. And the majority of the book is them. I guess it takes about a third of the book before they actually get to the Ringworld, but they crash, and the rest of the book is them trying to find a way off while kind of exploring along the way. And the entire thing, it reminded me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because you have a lot of absurdist humor where, I mean, just the puppeteers are so over the top, ridiculous, and weird. And there's so many things in the book like that, including things that people say and the names of things and stuff like that. There's one character that has just like a really long name that's just a bunch of consonants, basically. And it reminded me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, partially for the humor, but even the plot was kind of similar. You have an Earth male being taken off of Earth because it's going to be destroyed by a two-faced alien, and you end up having a human female with him too. It was really strange because it seemed to kind of shift between focus a lot, because you have conversations where, well, the one thing that pervaded was the humor, because it mostly came out of the character interactions with each other, and a lot of the book is just them talking to each other and trying to figure things out. But you'll have stuff that's really funny, and then suddenly you'll cut to a sort of serious science discussion about some element of the Ringworld and how it works, which I did enjoy that. I thought it was cool that they actually explained a lot of stuff in a real world kind of way, but it did kind of stop the book. And you just kind of get a science lesson for a page, and then it would continue on. And you'd have action scenes that would come out of nowhere and go on for multiple pages. And it was just kind of weird. It felt like it was kind of jumping around everywhere. And I mostly was interested for the weirdness. The story never really pulled me in. I think if the characters had stronger motivations other than just, we have to get off of this thing and let's explore along the way. And the stuff that they encounter, some of it is really weird. At one point, there's like a giant eyeball floating in the sky that almost makes everybody go crazy. That was probably the weirdest thing, but it turns out to be something that is not what you think it is. And the explanation I thought was really stupid. But most of the stuff they encounter is just kind of like, oh, we're going over a desert for like 5 chapters and there's nothing here, or here's a river with some people in it, and the people that they find look human, so there's kind of they kind of make some inferences as to how some things came about, but they don't really explain a whole lot. But by the end of the book, I was mostly wondering what the point of it all was. I liked how goofy it was, I liked the humor, but I was never really invested in anything that was going on. So I was disappointed overall, but I could definitely see some people really liking it. And I read it for a book club, and somebody else there was talking about the second one, the Ringworld Engineers, which he wrote like more than 10 years later, I think, and apparently he never intended to write it, but people kept writing him about the first one and saying like, it's really cool that you did this because this is how it would be in real life. And then other people saying, this makes no sense at all. Here's why you're wrong about everything. So he kind of decided to write another book to answer a bunch of questions or address a bunch of issues that people had. And that one sounded a lot more interesting. So I probably will check that out, but maybe not anytime soon. I don't know. So I don't know. I would recommend it to people that like Hitchhiker's Guide, I think, mostly. But it's not as overtly funny. It's a bit more character and story focused, even if the story I didn't think was that interesting. I read The Perfect Assassin from 2022.
Is that a how-to book?
No. By James Patterson and Brian Sitz. So really it's written by Brian Sitz, and James Patterson slapped his name on it. I had never read a James Patterson book before, and there are reasons for that. He's kind of a joke among people that actually care about what they're reading. The reason I read this is the cover said, a Doc Savage thriller. And I've talked about Doc Savage a bunch of times on the channel already. I'm a big fan of the original Doc Savage stories. As questionable as the writing can be, the stories are very entertaining, and I like the creativity and everything. So this book is set in the present. Those original stories were from like the 30s through the 40s. It's set in the present. You have a guy whose last name is Savage, who is a wimpy college professor who gets kidnapped by this strange, enigmatic woman who forces him to go through a training regimen where he basically pushes himself to superhuman levels of physical ability and mental ability, which doesn't make any sense at all, but I don't know, that's what happens. I guess it didn't make sense in the original stories either, why Doc Savage could do what he could do. You don't find out until halfway through the book that this guy is the great-grandson, I think, of the original Doc Savage, and it turns out the woman who kidnapped him is the great-granddaughter of John Sunlight, who I talked about before as being kind of, I think, the only recurring Doc Savage villain in the original story, so I'm glad I read those first, even though it doesn't end up mattering here at all, and there are tons of contradictions with the original stories. But the book so much of it was focused on her, and it was really weird because the stuff focusing on Doc Savage would be in first person from his perspective. But then when you go to her, it's mostly flashbacks in third person that are taking place in Eastern Europe somewhere. The whole thing, the entire book felt like watching a PG-13 action movie, a very generic one. She was kidnapped as a baby and put through this school for assassins or whatever. It felt like a Black Widow kind of thing. It felt like the kind of thing you've seen in every dumb action movie trailer where you kind of say, I'm not actually going to watch that movie. I can't believe they put this crap out. And then it becomes, a big mainstream hit. Because that's basically what James Patterson is he's appealing to those kind of people that watch those kind of movies.
Well, I'm going to talk about one of those movies in a couple minutes.
Oh, what a surprise. Well, you might like this book because it wasn't good.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so halfway through, you find out what's happening. You find out that this girl has escaped from that school, and she wants to take it down now. And they're sending assassins after her because she knows about everything and whatever. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It actually got a lot worse in the second half, which is when I became more interested because they actually brought in some Doc Savage stuff. But even that was very minimal. They never mention any of his compatriots from the original stories. They mention finding a photo of John Sunlight and that he almost looked as muscular as Doc Savage, which is the opposite of how he's described in the original stories where he's really thin. So that was weird. And just to give an idea of how stupid and simplistic this book is, my very first thought when I opened it up was, wow, this looks like a f***ing Goosebumps book, because the chapters are so short. The book is not long. It's like, I don't know, probably 200 something pages, but it has over 100 chapters.
Are the chapter numbers that oozy font?
No, unfortunately not. And it doesn't have the cliffhanger endings all the time, but it does have them every once in a while, which they work exactly the same way they do in the Goosebumps books, where you'll have a monster pop out or whatever, but then as soon as you finish that chapter and get to the next one, the very next line is, oh, but it turned out it was just my brother playing a prank on me or whatever. This book would have a chapter end with, they were surrounded by tons of people with guns pointing directly at them. There was no way they could escape. And then the first line of the next chapter would be, they dodged the bullets and got away, or something stupid like that. It was so dumb. And there was one part where they're flying in a plane and they get shot down. And by pure coincidence, they were not trying to find this location. They were not going to this location on purpose. Doc Savage happens to, they land in like a lake or something, and he happens to wash ashore not right next to, but literally on the Fortress of Solitude, which is not in the Arctic like it was in the original stories, but for some reason is in some place in Russia, which, I mean, parts of Russia are in the Arctic, but this part was not. And there's no explanation for why it's there or why he happened to find it. It's just there because it's a Doc Savage thing. And that's really the only Doc Savage thing in there, other than the fact that he's a descendant. So yeah, the entire book was stupid. It kept getting worse as it went on, because when it started out, I was surprised that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't good, but it wasn't that bad. It was just very bland. But by the end, it was so dumb that I was just really pissed off at it. And the writing level is basically Goosebumps level 2, so which actually fits with the original stories, because the writing wasn't good in those. But this one was just so generic and dumb. So yeah, I can't imagine anybody enjoying this, and especially the only people it would appeal to, I would think, would be Doc Savage fans, and I can't imagine them liking it. So I don't know, it was really dumb. And the same team had previously rebooted The Shadow also, which was originally another pulp character put out by the same company as Doc Savage. And I haven't read any of those original stories, but I do want to check those out. I'm kind of curious to maybe read some of those and then read the James Patterson version, because I'm sure it's going to be really dumb. I know it takes place in the future and involves like a psychic girl or something, which has nothing to do with The Shadow. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I read Buffy, the Legacy Collection, Book 3, which was continuing the Dark Horse Buffy comics that came out during the run of the show. So this was basically during season 4. Book 2 was a huge step up from book 1, but still was nothing great. This book is another step up from volume 2, not as dramatic of one. It was very surprising because the tone of everything is much more serious than the show. It's much more plot focused. It's much more, we have to stop these monsters right now. You still have some dumb humor that has not improved in the way that the humor in the show has improved, but they at least have stopped doing the dumb jokes at the end of every issue where you're kind of trying to predict what the dumb joke is going to be. I think they only did that once in this book. and the art has gotten better, the writing is better, everything is better. I would say people that are fans of the show might actually enjoy this one. I think I hesitantly recommended Volume 2 to those kind of people. I think they would probably like Volume 3. I will say it is still the kind of thing where you'll forget about the stories as soon as they're done. They feel like they don't matter. I think part of the problem is the characters don't really have anything to do on a personal level. Every once in a while, they'll try to give one of them a subplot of some kind, but it's the same subplots that you've seen in the show already, and they've already been... I mean, the show does kind of bring up the same things over and over again, even if they've already been resolved, but it feels like doing that again, but in a much less substantial way. And in a way where once the story's done, you kind of say, wait a minute, did they even get back to that? And the answer is not really. And then they just never bring it up again. So, I don't know. It still wasn't great, but it does keep improving, so that's good. I read Tender is the Flesh from 2017, which is a novel by Agustina Bazterrica. I don't know. She's Argentinian, so it's translated. This was a book with an interesting premise. The entire world has reverted to cannibalism, supposedly because there's a virus that has infected animals where if you eat any animals that are infected, you will die.
So can't eat plants? Can't just go vegetarian? Gotta start eating... You just gotta start eating people?
That is one of the many questions that I had just reading this book. And the way they kind of wave that off is just saying, well, they don't get enough protein if they just eat plants. So that's not valid, even though people do that already. I mean, it's... Oh, man, yeah. I had a lot of problems with the overall concept of this book. The way they talk about the virus doesn't make any sense either. I would think if a virus was infecting all animals, it would infect people the same way, but it's not killing the animals, so why would it kill people? I don't know.
You know, bugs got a lot of protein, too.
Yeah, and I don't think bugs are infected.
Peanuts and beans have a lot of protein, too.
Yeah, there are easy ways to get around not eating meat. Again, people do this their entire lives, so why would... I don't know.
But I will say I'm a little hesitant around those people. I keep my arms and legs to myself. I don't want them lashing out and biting me or something because they want some meat.
That's valid. You do find out, kind of as the book goes on, that the whole virus thing might be a front that is just kind of given as an excuse for people to have a reason to eat other people.
I don't need an excuse.
If it was just one community or one country or something, I could maybe kind of accept it because, I mean, there have been cultures in history that have eaten other people and there still are. But the idea that the entire world basically is the same on the same page with this. At one point, they do say that India was kind of holding out and opposing it, but then partway through the book, they kind of give in. I don't know. It's just a ridiculous premise. But the story basically is following a guy that works at a slaughterhouse. So, a slaughterhouse for humans now. His infant child died a while back, and he's estranged from his wife, and he's kind of just going through all these crises. He's not comfortable with his job and, basically having a bunch of humans killed. I will also say these humans that they eat are specifically bred for meat.
Oh, I thought you were going to end that sentence different and say they were made out of bread.
No, it could have been interesting that way too, but no, it's not like they're just pulling people off the street and eating them, although that does happen too. I mean, they talk a lot about how your people are only comfortable eating meat that doesn't have a name, but I don't know. There's a lot of indications that people are being captured and murdered and eaten by other people and stuff. And there's even there's one part where there's like a hunting preserve or whatever, where people that used to be hunters that don't have animals to hunt anymore because most of the animals have been wiped out, they now hunt people, and some of them are people that were bred for meat or whatever, but they even have people that are in debt. They can go to this guy that owns this place and say, hey, I will agree to be one of your huntees if you, if they survive for however long, the guy will wipe out their debt, basically. But, they're risking their lives. And at one point, there's a famous singer or somebody that is in there, and I think he was in there for 3 days, and he only had a few hours left, and he gets killed. And so they eat him. The book seems to be, it seems like it's trying to say things. And there are there are times when you can tell what it's trying to say. I mean, a lot of it is about kind of the nature of humanity and the acceptance of evil in just general society and stuff. You would think maybe part of it would be saying that something about inhumane like a vegan angle or a vegetarian angle of like we shouldn't be eating animals or something like that. But it doesn't fit with the way the book is presented. So I don't think that's what it's going for. By the time it was done, I kind of wasn't sure really what it was trying to say. It definitely was interesting. It definitely wasn't bad. And if the idea sounds interesting, I would recommend that people check it out. But my problem with it was mostly that it spends so much time explaining everything, but there were things that seemed like holes early on that later on kind of... I did like the book better as it went on because it kind of started hinting that things that you thought... Things that were presented as fact early on might not actually be true, but there are too many holes to jump through, I guess, in terms of believing that things would turn out the way they did in the book, the way they're presented in the book. Either if she had made the book more of a satirical thing or an allegorical thing, it could have worked better. Or if she hadn't spent so much of the book, because it's not very long, if she hadn't spent so much of the book explaining things and explaining how this world works, I think it would be easier to look past things, because it's her explanations that make you say, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. Why wouldn't they do it like this? And I also had a problem with the way, this would be getting a little too deep into it, but the way people regard the meat people as animals, because there really isn't anything different between them and everybody else. And it's clear that a lot of people have moral issues with it, and they're trying to kind of look past the fact that these are people. But it seems like nobody is really... There's not any kind of real outcry against any of this. It just kind of is accepted that you're going to eat people now. I don't know. I thought it just, there were too many things that strained credibility, I guess is what I would say. But it definitely was interesting. This book was recommended to me by a couple of people, which is why I read it. I wasn't really interested because the premise didn't make sense to me in the first place. And I still had issues with the premise, but it definitely was interesting. So I guess I would recommend it to people that find that idea interesting. That's everything I read this month. I have been playing the Resident Evil 2 remake finally.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm playing it on the PS4. I am enjoying it quite a bit. At first I was kind of unsure, but I am liking it a lot. This one allows you to play on hard or hardcore mode right from the start, so that's what I did. And at first I was kind of regretting that. I was thinking maybe I would have enjoyed it a little more if I had started it on normal, but I got used to it. The original Resident Evil 2 is my favorite Resident Evil game. It's one of my favorite games, period. So they're going off of a game that already works really well. And I'm still disappointed that we didn't get a GameCube Resident Evil 1 remake of Resident Evil 2, but this one is good. I do like it. It still has the stupid Capcom thing that you get in every one of these games, where they kind of have these scenes that are supposed to be serious, but they're so full of cliches and just so dumb that you just can't take it seriously. I know they said that part of their intention with this game was making zombies scary again, to where every individual zombie is a threat. And I think they completely succeeded. I really like the zombies in this game and how the gameplay works around them. And I really, really like Mr. X. I don't know if they call him Mr. X in this one. I think so far they've just referred to him as the Tyrant. But he is really, really cool. I really, really like what they did with him. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. And I can already see why people would be disappointed with Resident Evil 3, which I still haven't played. But I can't imagine Nemesis in that game being as effective as Mr. X is in this one, because it's the same basic concept. I mean, that's where the idea for Nemesis came from originally, was they said, how about if we took Mr. X from Resident Evil 2, but just had him through the entire game? So I'm liking it a lot. My big issues, because I do have a couple of issues, are issues that I also had with Resident Evil 7, and they're kind of issues that I have with a lot of modern games in general. It's a big thing with modern games to go for immersion, to try to have everything be super realistic. And it's the kind of thing where in older games there would be actions that you would do in the game where you would just hit a button and it'd be like, okay, it's done, like you did it. But in modern games it'll go through a whole animation of your character doing it.
Can you give me an example of like an old one? Because I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like in this game, there are, and this is true for Resident Evil 7 also, there are certain doors that you have to open or things that you have to move where you hold a button to do it, and it'll go through this animation of like Leon lifting over a filing cabinet that has knocked over and blocked a door or something like that. It takes too long to go through the animation, and it just kind of stops the game. You kind of have to sit there and wait for him to do it, and before you can even do it, you have to hold a button for like 3 seconds. Why do I have to hold the button? Why can't I just hit X like I would have done in an older game? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, could part of that be for Resident Evil at least? Because you could get attacked during that time?
No. You would think so. Like there are other games that do things in that way. But in here, no. It's just you just have to hold it. It's almost as if you're putting the effort into it. I think is the intention by holding the button down. That's like your way of pulling the thing over. But he doesn't do it until after you've held the button down. Even in the older Resident Evil games, if you had to push something, you would move your character over to it and you would push your character. You would be the one doing the action. But in here, you hold a button and then your character does the action. It feels like there's less involvement on the part of the player and it's more just activating an animation instead.
You know, I always wished that they had come out, one, with Silent Hill 2 on the Wii, but then also a wooden board that the Wii remote would fit into. And
Yeah,
you'd have to physically swing it down every time you wanted to swing it on screen.
that would have been awesome. I totally would have been into that.
And it would be weighted really awkwardly, so it would be just as awkward as he looked like in the game.
Yeah. See, I mean, that at least is more legitimate immersion. I know you're making a joke, but that is something that actually involves the player. And this game is not the best example for. There's another thing I'm going to talk about, but just modern games. A lot of modern games have. Actually, this is a better example. There's kind of the stealth kill mechanic that you have in a lot of games, where you walk up behind a character, behind an enemy, and hit a button, and there will be this elaborate animation of doing what's supposed to be a stealth kill, but usually in these games it's really loud, where your character will pull out a knife and slit their throat or whatever, and there's just like blood everywhere and people screaming and stuff. I think of like Horizon Zero Dawn as an example of this, where there's a lot of instances of hit a button and your character is going to do all this crap, and you're not actually doing it yourself. I like games that are where you're the one playing the game and the game is not playing itself. But modern games do a lot of things where I guess it would just be too complicated for the player to do it, I guess, is what they think, or something. I think they also just think it's cool to have this animation play when you go up behind somebody and kill somebody. But when it happens all the time, so many times in the game, it just kind of stops the game because you have to sit there and wait for the animation to play out before you can keep playing again. And that was another problem with this game, with Resident Evil 2, and this is by far my biggest problem with it. In classic Resident Evil games, when you get attacked by a zombie, when you get grabbed, you mash the buttons to try to get away, as fast as you can. The faster you mash, the less damage you take. If depending on which game you're playing, you might not take any damage. In this game, when you get grabbed by a zombie, you can't do anything. You have to sit and wait for this animation to play out of a zombie grabbing you, biting you, and it goes on for way too long. And it literally stops the game because you're here all tense trying to get away from these zombies and fighting them and stuff. But then as soon as you get grabbed, you have to just sit there and wait for this animation to play out. And then the game gets back to it.
So the damage is always constant.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's really disappointing. I wish there was, again, a gameplay element to it instead of sitting there and watching it happen. So that's my biggest problem with it. 7 had a lot more things that I had problems with like that, where your character would get knocked down and there's a whole, since it's in first person, you see your hands on the pavement or whatever, and your character is so slow and takes forever to get back up, whether it's in a cutscene or in the actual game. It just takes forever, and it doesn't add tension, it doesn't add realism or whatever. It just makes it take longer. It's not good for the game because it breaks up the gameplay in a not good way. It takes you out of the game and makes you have to sit there and wait for this to get done with before you can get back into it. So that's a modern game thing. I feel like that's a very common thing nowadays, and I really don't like that trend. It's up there with like QuickTime events as things that I don't like. But overall, I do like Resident Evil 2 a lot. Those are the getting bitten by a zombies thing does bother me a lot. The other one is relatively minor in this game, but I wanted to talk about it because it's, again, like just a trend in modern games. I knew I shouldn't have killed that guy.
And then eaten him. He had a name.
That just makes them more tasty as far as I'm concerned. So the other game I'm going to mention briefly is kind of different because it's a mobile game, one of those freemium games, but it's actually really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
This should be interesting.
It's Godzilla Battle Line, which I really like, not just because it's a Godzilla game, but it actually is a really well put together game. Usually you think of these dumb freemium games and it's the kind of thing where you can only progress if you're, putting money into it, or, if you're trying to do it without putting money into it, it's just going to take so long to progress that there's no point in playing it. This game is different because instead of playing through like just a game like that where you kind of have to get to the next level before you can do anything else and it just takes forever to do that, in here you're playing against other people. And basically what you do is you collect your set of monsters to use in a battle, and the other player will have their set of monsters, and you fight each other. So you do upgrade your monsters as it goes on, but you're fighting other people that are also upgrading their monsters, and it mostly tries to pitch you against other players that are about on the same level as you. So it doesn't feel unfair. It doesn't feel like if you're not putting money into it, you're not going to be able to play it. And it involves a lot of strategy. It's basically a strategy game. So it's probably the best way to do a freemium game in terms of the player. I see them, the company, probably making less money because of that, because you don't need to put money into it if you want to play it. And as a Godzilla fan, it's really cool that they have so many monsters in there. Every month or so, they add in more stuff, and it's been out for years. So I'm surprised that they're still pushing it so much. And they also cross-promote with the Shin Japan Heroes Universe thing, which is kind of like a whole marketing thing over there, where you've got Shin Evangelion, Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, and Shin Kamen Rider. Stuff from all of those properties thrown together into this one game. They even have Godzilla music when you are in the battles and stuff. So it's really cool. For Godzilla fans, I would definitely recommend checking it out. If you're afraid that it's going to be one of those games that sucks you in and you just keep playing it for a long time, it is. So, watch out.
It's clear you do not play too many mobile games.
Yeah, I mean, I played one other Godzilla game before. I don't even remember what it was called, where literally the entire game was just you tap your fingers on the screen as fast as you can. Not even in specific places or anything. It was just keep tapping the screen to have your army shoot against these monsters and whatever. And it was really dumb. It was cool in terms of how many monsters were in it, but that's the only reason I played it for. And they abandoned it before really doing too much with it. This game is really cool. I really like it. I mean, I feel like if this was a console game or something, it could be cool. It's definitely the best Godzilla game that I've ever played.
What? You haven't played Super Godzilla.
I actually own Super Godzilla, and I don't own a Super Nintendo, so yeah. Oh no, I think I own Godzilla King of the Monsters, maybe. I can't remember. But yeah, for Godzilla fans, I would definitely recommend at least checking it out, because there's a lot of cool stuff in it. And that's everything I did this month. So what did you check out?
There's a lot of Transformers stuff. I watched... let me get a drink of water. And when I return, I'll tell you everything I watched. I watched the entirety of Transformers from the original cartoon. So that's season 1, 2, 3, and 4. Season 1 feels pretty standard and disjointed. Each episode features the Decepticons finding a new source of energy and trying to steal it, and the Autobots stop them. Season 2 is where things really pick up. There are new characters introduced on both sides with no explanation, but it doesn't happen too rapidly, although it doesn't really make any sense where these robots were before. The animation also gets much better in Season 2. It's not even close to the movie, but it's much better than Season 1. And the writing expands a little bit to be more interesting than, oh, we found another source of energy. The voice acting is really good. The actors put a lot of character into their voices. It feels like they actually give a shit, and they're trying to give these characters different personalities, even though the stories sometimes are not super interesting.
Yeah, my favorite was Hugo Weaving.
Uh-huh. And while there are giant robots that transform into vehicles and jets and stuff, the plot of these episodes is not too crazy. Then the movie happened. The movie is awesome. And the purpose of the movie was to get rid of all of the characters and bring in a bunch of other characters so they could sell new toys. And then season 3 happened after the movie, and that's where everything starts to fall apart. So most of the main cast has been killed off, and we're introduced to all these new toys. But one of the problems is that the show had all of these established characters and personalities go through all of these different scenarios with each other, and suddenly 95% of them are gone. Even the ones who aren't gone still don't show up. Maybe there will be one episode where someone who didn't die in the movie shows up, has 3 lines, and then disappears again. If they had made it a more gradual shift, it would have worked better. But all of a sudden, the entire cast is made up of characters you don't know who they are. And at this point, the show becomes a much more generic children's cartoon. For a good chunk of this season, the main characters are the little kid robot who only speaks in rhymes, the robot who talks really, really fast all of the time, that's his gimmick, the robot who talks like a TV commercial, which is hard to explain, but it's annoying.
Girls, best day to get your way is be good, say hey, hey!
And the human woman who sounds like Shaun's girlfriend in Shaun of the Dead when she's upset.
You promised You go back to the gym. You promised you'd try drinking red wine instead of beer.
Rodimus, is that you? It's me, Fairborn.
Season 2 threw in some space stuff. You know, we see some things on Cybertron, where they came from, what's going on there. But Season 3 throws in everything. And like I said, it's more of a generic children's cartoon where the writers are like, who gives a shit? So there are multiple time travel episodes. There are episodes where everything is Renaissance themed, whether it's on Earth or some other planet. Multiple episodes like that. Episodes that take place in somebody's dreams.
That's weird.
2 episodes where the dumbest character saves the entire universe. And by dumbest, I mean lowest intelligence. He's the one that talks like a caveman. The lowest point of the season, though, was one of the Galvatron episodes. So in the movie, Megatron, who is the main villain, is defeated, and he's transformed into a new toy, Galvatron. And in the movie, he's voiced by Leonard Nimoy, who did a good job. It was cool.
I will rip open Ultra Magnus and every other Autobot.
But in the show, they obviously couldn't keep Leonard Nimoy, so Frank Welker took over. And Frank Welker voices a bunch of the other characters already anyway. But he voices Galvatron in his whiny Scooby-Doo villain voice, which is awful.
In the shape he's in, he won't know what hit him!
The events of the movie have made Galvatron insane, which was one of the very few interesting storylines post-movie. But they don't do anything with it. And at one point, I think the lowest point of the season, in a very low season overall, his henchmen are so fed up with and concerned with his behavior that they take him to a planet. It feels so dumb to say it out loud. They take him to a therapy planet and trick him into getting therapy. So I want you to imagine this giant robot sitting in a bed with a blanket over his legs, raving about how he wants to destroy everything and kill everybody, while a weird alien is sitting next to him with a clipboard going, I see. He also makes a gun in arts and crafts. The theme for season 3 and 4 is different than the previous 2 seasons, and it sounds like they had this group of people who were ready to record, but then right as the engineer hit the record button, somebody dropped a box of scorpions.
I'm not gonna lie, you're making this show sound kind of interesting. I didn't make it past season 1, so maybe I missed out on the good stuff.
And at the end of the season, they bring Optimus Prime back. Well, they did it in the middle of the season too, but they do it for real at the end. And season 4 is only 3 episodes long.
Why?
Probably because it was a dumb show at that point. It really wasn't making the money they wanted it to.
It just seems like it wouldn't be worth it from a production standpoint to make 3 episodes.
I agree. Maybe they had some contractual obligation or something. I am going to watch the Japanese cartoon, which ignores season 4 and picks up after season 3. And I'm very interested to see how that turned out, considering season 3 was so stupid. And watch Mortal Kombat from 2021. We have done a video for the 90s movie. That was a while ago. I don't really remember doing that. I remember when this movie was announced and people were very excited. And they had a trailer where people were telling me, dude, you gotta watch the trailer. It's not what you expect. It's not campy. It's not ridiculous. It feels so grounded. And I laughed and I said, that's bullshit. And I never watched the trailer. But I finally got around to watching the movie. And I gotta say, it was campy and ridiculous.
I mean, is Mortal Kombat something that would lend itself to something serious and realistic? I don't think so.
No, absolutely not. Knowing the source material, there is no way it can't be ridiculous. The characters, the story, the conflict, you can put in as much dramatic music and slow-mo shots of people shaking with rage, but it is still Mortal Kombat, spelled with a K. It is always going to be Mortal Kombat. Liu Kang is gonna shoot a fire dragon out of his hands. Kano is gonna blast people with his laser eye. Melina is gonna have big fake CGI teeth, and Scorpion is going to scream, "Get over here," in English, despite every other line he speaks in the movie is in Japanese. Something that really showcases how trying to make this movie serious didn't work was the Kano character. And I don't think I'm alone here, but usually I cannot stand the character in any movie who's over making wisecracks on the side and everyone's always rolling their eyes at him.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But for this movie, he was probably one of the few good parts, maybe the only good part. And for me, it was because he was the only one calling out how stupid everything was when everyone else was scowling the whole time. even though Sonya just told them how our world is one of many dimensions, and the transferring dragon birthmark means you are a warrior that has been chosen for the realm of Earth. It's Mortal Kombat, and everyone goes, I understand. And he's over there going, what the are you talking about? You look at the old movie, and when crazy shit happens, everyone who is not a part of the crazy shit says, holy shit, did you see that? What the is going on here? And then techno music starts to play. But in this one, all the crazy shit happens, and people just look at it and take it at face value and go, Oh, and one of the big draws of this one was they claimed there was going to be a remix of the theme from the old one. You know the one I'm talking about.
Of course.
And I heard it in the movie, and it was very lame. It was an attempt to, I guess, make it kind of orchestral, which doesn't make any sense. That's not the kind of piece it is. And they still left in the guy screaming. Granted, I might go to a concert where an orchestra was going to play that theme and they had the dude screaming Mortal Kombat. Maybe, if it were free. I mean, I could arrange that myself, but that doesn't make it good. It was overall a really dumb movie, and the way it was shot made it feel like a crappy play. I look forward to watching the next one.
It doesn't sound like a good bad movie then, just kind of a bad movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I watched Gremlins 2 from 1990. I prefer the first movie.
I vastly prefer the second movie.
Really?
I hated the first movie. I should go back and watch it again, but I really liked the second one.
This one is a completely different type of movie than the first one. It ramps up the silliness to 11 and completely ditches the horror feeling of the first one. For those who don't know, this one takes place in a giant office building owned by a billionaire where each floor is crazy. There's a genetics lab on one, there's a spa on another one, there's an art studio on a floor, there's a TV studio on another one, and they're all connected by elevators that talk. I think that's a marketing for this movie. How fun! Gremlins! Whereas the first one, people were getting shot with crossbows and shit by crazy monsters.
I mean, that was my problem with the first one, is the tone, to me, didn't really work. Whereas this one feels more consistent.
This one feels too campy. The first one masqueraded as another critter kids flick, only to turn into this horror movie that usually, when people are watching with their kids, go, oh, I didn't realize it was this violent, or oh, I didn't realize it was this horrible. The second one, it's too tongue-in-cheek. Having Leonard Maltin rip on the first one only to be killed by gremlins themselves is a perfect example of this movie.
Yeah, I really liked that approach.
I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying I like the first one better. Having the gremlins bust into Christopher Lee's genetics lab and drink a bunch of science potions to turn them into bats and really smart, and one turns into electricity. It's so silly. The whole thing is so silly. And it is entertaining, I guess, but it turned this movie into a critter kids flick. The effects are really good, and Rick Baker signed on to this one because he was given a lot of freedom. Initially, he didn't want to do it, but then when they told him you can give them all personalities, you can kind of do whatever you want, he said, all right.
And I think that's a big part of what I liked about it, is that you never know what's going to pop up next. And the effects are really, really cool, and I think they're way better than the first one.
I agree, but I can't imagine you sitting watching them doing that big rendition of New York, New York, and going, wow, this is a great movie. I'm Robert.
I don't know. I mean, I don't remember that part, but I thought the movie was very entertaining, whereas I remember being kind of bored with the first one.
It is entertaining. I'm not saying it's not entertaining. I like John Glover's performance as the CEO because of the company name, the company logo. You'd expect him to be the RoboCop type of CEO, but he's more like a good-natured kid with ADHD who also happens to have $1 billion. And even his resolution at the end, it's not like he turns from a jerk into a nice person because of all of the events. He's always pretty much been a nice person. He just realizes that his idea of a giant, smart office building didn't work. And he takes it in stride and just moves on to the next one. I thought that was an interesting take on that character. I watched It Chapter 2 from 2019. It Chapter 2 is a humorous movie. It casts a lot of funny people who say funny things and perform funny actions. But it's freaking It. It shouldn't be a humorous movie. It was really curious when I saw this movie in the theater, and it was just as curious watching it home this time. I don't get why they felt this movie needed to be a comedy, especially when the first movie is much more straightforward and not a comedy. You have some humorous moments, but for Chapter 2, the whole thing is funny. I think the actors that were cast did a good job here, and the writing is pretty solid. I just don't understand why it's a comedy. It makes everything feel like it's not as serious as the characters keep telling us it is, because after they tell us, they'll follow it up with 16 jokes. It's not a bad movie on its own, but I would take the first one over this one in terms of an adaptation of the book. Have you seen either Part 1 or Part 2?
I have not. I've just seen the Tim Curry one.
I watched The 10th Victim from 1965. Did you talk about this one?
No, I mentioned the 7th Victim from the 40s. I don't know what this is.
Was that the Robert Sheckley?
No, it was a Robert Wise related thing.
Okay, because this movie is an Italian movie based on a 1950s short story by Robert Sheckley, which is also called The 7th Victim.
Oh, I thought you said the 10th Victim.
The movie is called The 10th Victim.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Okay, no, the 7th Victim movie was from the 40s.
Okay, The 7th Victim short story is from the 50s.
Okay.
And the 10th Victim movie is from the 60s. So the premise is there's something called the Big Hunt. And if you sign up for the Big Hunt, you go through 10 hunts. 5 as the hunter and 5 as the victim. You can go anywhere and do anything. You just have to hunt the victim. And the hunter knows everything about the victim. They're given all the information from the Central Bureau. And the victim does not know anything about the hunter, so they always have to be on edge. And whoever's alive at the end of the pursuit moves on to the next hunt. And if you make it through 10, you win a bunch of money and you're famous and a bunch of other stuff. And the reason the Big Hunt exists is to keep the masses from just going crazy and killing each other, because it's a form of violent entertainment, which is nothing new to science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of Tender is the Flesh, kind of, where they say that maybe eating people is to keep the population down.
What I found very interesting about this movie, though, was there's a lot of comedic elements. The hunter and the victim for this hunt end up falling for each other throughout their encounters, and they're both trying to kill each other, but they're trying to do it in the best way for their public brand. And being the 60s, there's a lot of pop art stuff, and the whole thing is very satirical. It was very entertaining, if a little bit slow at times. Just the way the characters act is pretty goofy.
Yeah, it definitely sounds interesting.
I read The Essential X-Men Volume 6. Mystique takes a bunch of former villains and they become federal agents. So, the bad guys are now supposedly the good guys. So that's going through. There's a whole lot of New Mutant stuff, a huge chunk of which takes place in Asgard. The main X-Men team gets shaken up quite a bit, and they find ways to get staple members out of the way, mainly by dropping buildings on them and stuff. Nightcrawler has an identity crisis, and he falls into a coma at some point, I think because a building falls on him.
I think doesn't he get shocked by a harpoon or something?
Yeah, that might be it. Colossus also gets hurt by the Marauders and is in a coma.
I think he's awake, he just can't move, but I can't remember for sure.
There's a whole trial of Magneto, which was pretty good, where he basically says, yeah, I've been a jerk. I guess I should own up to my actions. And everyone's like, you jerk. And he's like, I just said that.
Yeah, I really like the Chris Claremont approach to Magneto and kind of the added complexity to his character.
Yeah, definitely. There's more stuff with Rachel Summers, now is the new Phoenix, fighting the Beyonder, and she teaches him the true value of life or whatever. Very generic. He's going to destroy the universe, but then she lets him read her thoughts, and he's like, how could I not realize? I don't even remember what happens to him after that.
Yeah, I actually don't either.
Nimrod shows up, and that's one of the times where the X-Men and Mystique's group have to work together. X-Factor also shows up in this volume. And a lot of this with X-Factor and the New Mutants and stuff was tough because I don't have the other X-Factor stuff to relate to that was happening at the same time. So things skip around a lot in these volumes, which I think the Marvel Epic collection solve, right? Because they'll pull in whatever they need to make it chronologically work.
Yeah, but they do still have X-Factor and X-Men generally separate, and New Mutants.
The biggest event out of this volume was the Marauders killing all of the Morlocks. X-Men were there, X-Factor was there, Power Pack was there, Thor showed up there. It was a pretty big deal.
And that was the first time that Sabretooth ever showed up in an X-Men comic.
Oh, I didn't know that. Was he in the Wolverine solo comic before?
No, the Wolverine solo comic hadn't started yet at that point. He was introduced in Iron Fist like 10 years earlier and was mostly a Power Man and Iron Fist villain at that point. But there was always the intention that, well, the original intention was that he would turn out to be Wolverine's dad. But too many readers kind of figured that out, so they said, well, let's do something else. And I think that's part of why they delayed having him show up in X-Men for so long, because they were trying to figure something else out.
His dad.
Yeah. Well, see, that was after they threw out the idea of having Wolverine turn out to be an actual Wolverine that was evolved into human form. So
You're making shit up.
no, that's true. That the High Evolutionary originally was going to have turned him into a human Wolverine.
Okay, well, I guess the High Evolutionary does do shit like that.
Yeah.
Didn't he have his animal men? Or man men, or whatever the he called them? The man men.
Yeah, I actually can't remember. Was it the Beastmen or I know the Beastmen was in Dr. Moreau. It might have been the Animen. I can't remember.
Apocalypse showed up really, really quickly. He picked up a few people for his new 4 Horsemen, but he didn't show up after that at all. So was that happening somewhere else, or was that just supposed to be...
Yeah, he was an X-Factor villain at that point. Not really X-Men, just X-Factor.
And the Marauders mention Mr. Sinister by name once. Did he show up outside of this?
No, I think his first appearance was in the first issue of Volume 7.
Then he has the most ridiculous name possible.
Yeah, you mean the coolest name possible.
Man, the fact that he calls himself that and says it so confidently, give me a break. It sounds like a 1930s villain.
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that you put Mr. in front of it, it was so antiquated, even at that time.
Yeah, and for being the big villain that's kind of behind all this stuff, behind so many people getting massacred.
All in all, Volume 6 had a lot going on, and a lot of it was not actually contained in this volume, so that was great. I felt like I could really keep up with everything. I followed that up with Essential X-Men Volume 7, where even more stuff happens. Your favorite X-Men, Longshot, joins the team.
Oh, damn it. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
So Mojo shows up at the beginning, drops Longshot in there. The New Mutants fight the fact that they're both kids and stupid. And the X-Men get turned into babies. Didn't that happen before, too?
It's happened a bunch of times. Yeah, I don't know.
Psylocke shows up. Storm, who is still without her powers, spends pretty much the whole volume doing soul searching and then eventually searching for Forge. And then she finds him, and then he shoots her again, which gives her powers back. So I'm glad she went for so long without her powers. And I know I've said this before, but Claremont really seems to focus on Storm a lot. She's probably had the most growth out of any of them.
And I think that's part of what made that era of X-Men comics so good, is that Claremont wasn't afraid to have the characters go through arcs and stuff, to change and be affected by things that happen instead of keeping everything static.
Dazzler's a big part of the team now. And eventually they realized, she's just a walking flashbulb, which isn't the most interesting thing. So let's have her able to focus light into a laser, so at least she can shoot people. There's that whole Fantastic Four crossover where Kitty is permanently phasing out of existence. That's another main character that they kind of pushed off to the side. So the X-Men team up with Dr. Doom, who says he can save her. But then there's a whole Fantastic Four element to it where Reed had this diary that says that the Fantastic Four becoming the Fantastic Four was not an accident. He planned to have them all hit by cosmic rays. And they find the diary, and they're all really pissed at him. And he's like, man, I don't even remember doing that. And it turns out he didn't. Dr. Doom just made a fake diary and put it in a box.
Oh, man.
It was such a letdown for the end of that, because you were thinking, what's going to be the resolution to this? And at the end, Sue was like, Doom, you asshole. And he's like, hey, whatever. So Reed has this whole crisis of confidence, which is why he doesn't agree to help the X-Men at first. And when he says, I'm not going to do it, they respond by naturally just starting to attack him. So they all start fighting. So that was the thing on the cover where it's like, why would the Fantastic Four fight the X-Men? It's because they're all stupid. That's the reason.
The typical Marvel approach.
Where one character will be like, let me explain. And the other character goes, no, and then shoots a giant fireball at them. And I thought it was equally dumb that Franklin is the one who saves the day because he talks to everyone and gets them to just listen to each other. That's that volume. And at the end, Storm gets her powers back, and they have to fight... Is it the Trickster?
The Adversary? Is that the same guy, or is that somebody else?
That might be it, but I don't know if they call him that.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember. That was a little... Was it like Forge's arch enemy or something like that? Or like some spiritual thing?
It was the body of Forge's mentor, but he was masquerading as that. And it was yet another character who is just this omnipotent force who becomes physically attracted to Storm and says, hey, you're pretty, like, awesome. Let's make out.
I wonder if it might have been something from the ROM Space Knight comics that Marvel doesn't have the rights to anymore, so they can't reprint them.
I'm interested to see where Volume 8 goes, because there's, 11 of those?
I think so.
But I know the last couple are super expensive, so they must be really good. That's everything I read. I played Portal from 2007. For those who are not familiar, the idea of Portal is very simple. You have a portal gun that shoots an orange portal and a blue one, and entering through one exits through the other one, and you can shoot them pretty much anywhere. The game is very clean, it's very precise, the mechanics and rules are implemented, and then the developers toy around with those and create puzzles for you to solve to get from one side of the room to another. There's no real fear of death, since you just restart if you die. The story is there, but it feels very backgroundish. There are some hidden rooms with a few visuals that allude to a deeper plot, but nothing really picks up story-wise until the last battle, which in itself is a puzzle, and even though there's a time limit, it's very generous. The game inspired a lot of pop culture stuff and memes, which is surprising considering again how sparse the narrative actually is. It's a great idea with great execution. And after finishing the main story, I played the extra levels that were included, which I think were actually fan-created in maybe a web-based Portal game that was 2D. I'm not even sure. But it was integrated into the official game as extra content, which is cool. And then I played the campaign again with developer commentary turned on. So certain stages have these little icons where as you're playing, you can listen to the developers talk about the area you're in. And it was a great look into the generation of level development, as well as the difficulties they encountered and how they resolved them. I wish there was a little bit more overall behind-the-scenes stuff in the commentary, because it's really just focused on whatever room you're in at that moment. But it was still good. And I had played Portal way back in the day, so it was cool just to pick it up again. And it's not super long either. I followed it up with Portal 2, which was from 2011, and I had not played this one before, so I was looking forward to it. And this one, there is a huge focus on narrative, which is pretty much the opposite of the first one. Mechanics-wise, there are so many more variables introduced. Most of them are isolated to certain areas of the game, which is good, because it would be way too much to combine all that stuff together. The whole game felt much more experimental than the first one. Like the developer said, let's just put in whatever we can think of, but just make sure it works. And it does. The scope of everything is enormous, and that includes the story, the physical locations, the variables, just everything is so huge. The story mode makes the story mode of the first one feel like a demo. It was really enjoyable. It was a lot harder. I think it helped a lot to have played the first one, since you have the mindset of how everything works already. If I had started with this one, I think it would have been a lot harder just to get into it. I also played the co-op, which was so good. I applaud the designers for managing to even construct puzzles for two people that work. Because just thinking of the concept of two people, now each being able to shoot two portals, is crazy. The possibilities are crazy. And it was a lot of fun. As long as one person kind of knows what they're doing, you can do it. But it's even better if both people understand the mechanics of the game. And it was expansive. I was thinking the co-op would just be a couple of levels just as an experiment. But it was pretty much a campaign in itself. It was great. 10 out of 10.
Dang.
And that's all I did this month.
No freemium games to talk about.
I think the last mobile game I played was probably Dandy Dungeon.
What is that?
It was developed by Yoshiro Kimura from Onion Games, who worked on some of the Romancing Saga games, Little King Story, No More Heroes. And it was good. I'm pretty sure they shut a lot of this stuff down because it was kind of pay for extra stuff, which I didn't actually do, but you could still play the game without doing that. But yeah, I don't play mobile games.
I try not to. Well, thanks to everyone for wasting more of your time listening to our crap.
I said in our November video that one was going to come out in the spring of 2023, and that might actually happen. So this one, let's see.
And we are trying, I will say, we are trying to catch up on these.
These take a long time, and they're not our top priority. So until next time, I suppose. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.